It is now 9:20. From the Golden Gallery on the top of the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, hundreds of feet above the ground, we look out over this huge view of London. Down below us there, the rooftops of the city, the new and the old jumbled together. Tower Bridge in the far background, the towers of the Tower of London itself. Nearer to us lies the world of finance and of business, and further away there the warehouses of commerce, of imports and exports, and that distant paler grey on this winter morning of London River. The straight, tall, white steaming chimney of Bankside Power Station, pouring out its electricity where once Shakespeare's actors used to perform his plays. And across the river runs Blackfriars Bridge. Back from the south bank, leading the eye across all the distant buildings, high and low, that lie down there in Lambeth and Southwark and beyond, back again to the city immediately at the feet of the huge cathedral. And there the river, upstream towards King's Reach, Waterloo and Westminster, and then to the street below, the traffic still moving in it, cars on their way to the cathedral. Ludgate Hill. Ludgate Hill crowded this morning with thousands of people who've been pouring in since dawn to see the passing of the body of Winston Churchill on its way here to St. Paul's Cathedral, from which we've been looking, from which I'm talking at the moment. And that journey starts here at Westminster. Here is a familiar and a comforting picture to everyone, be the occasion one of gaiety or one of sadness like today. The scene of Westminster, of Big Ben, at its foot, the House of Commons. In the centre of the picture as we look, ancient Westminster Hall, where for these 3 days and nights past, hundreds of thousands of people have been passing the coffin on the catafalque. A third of a million people who finished only very early this morning when the hall was finally closed. Down outside in Palace Yard, where normally the members of Parliament come and go about their political and parliamentary business, all today is ceremony. The Royal Navy waits to carry out its duties of the gun carriage on which the coffin will be carried when it's brought out of the hall very soon. There's a big guard of honor standing ready. Royal carriages, which have been lent by the Queen to the Churchill family for this occasion, stand waiting behind. There are boys here from Harrow School, youngsters, cadets. You can see by the very movement of the people who've been able to get as close as this how bitterly cold it is this morning. Many people, not so much perhaps these youngsters, but many people have been waiting all night long, sitting huddled on the pavement's edge. And wherever you look on the route, you're able to see them, wrapped in their newspapers and their rugs. From Westminster, from this yard, outside where you see the part of the household cavalry now waiting in the procession, because the procession itself lies far beyond this point, waiting to be joined by the coffin as it's brought from the hall. Looking right up Whitehall, towards the cenotaph, all the government buildings massed around it. Picture that you see normally only in November. Royal Marines and others, almost obscured, but not quite, because you can see some of their colours flying. Nearly 200, nearly 300 members of the Danish underground resistance movement of the war, who arrived here by aeroplane from Denmark only about an hour ago and have been brought to this privileged position in the middle of Whitehall, bringing their banners, wearing their armbands, and who, when they have seen the procession go by, return at once to their own country. That brings us to the corner of Downing Street, strangely deserted in comparison with Whitehall. A police guard as ever outside the door. The familiar, unchanging front door of a house which has changed very much now in recent years, and which for a long, long time was Winston Churchill's official home. High above Trafalgar Square, right at the top of the column, Admiral Lord Nelson stands in the cold winter sky, looking down, as he does on all our great occasions, to where we look backwards now, down Whitehall towards Westminster, the way which the statue faces, where the Admiralty is. Here again you have the troops of the procession, standing at ease for the moment, cold. These, some of the young Royal Air Force men who are marching. The crowd not so thick here as it is in Whitehall, as it is further along the route. Northumberland Avenue in the background. Once again, people. And mostly people on the move. Some indeed, you see in the background, who have succumbed to the cold morning, and perhaps being up all night. Right in front of them, a plaque at the bottom of the Nelson Monument. It is in fact the plaque that shows the death of Nelson aboard Victory at Trafalgar. Plenty of naval memories here for a man who in all his life was closely associated with Britain's power and might at sea. Once again we move up the route, and high up now behind the little church of St. Mary le Strand. And we look right out once again over the river and the rooftops from this new position. There lies the little church in the center of the roadway. Still this everlasting procession of privileged motor cars on their way up from the Strand that winds its way all the way up here from Trafalgar Square. You see right in the distance, you can see still the Nelson column. Very familiar streets these to anyone who lives in London. Very, very familiar to Winston Churchill in his lifetime. All these multitude of times that he came up and down here on his official journeys into the city. High commissioners, foreign representatives of all kinds. The police, who have been on duty in their thousands during the night and in the past 2 or 3 days, the ambulance men and all the others, an indispensable part of all our state occasions. We're looking along the south side of the Strand now, turning our heads, as it were, towards the east, and looking back the way that the route runs from here on its way up to St. Paul's once again, looking into the city. You can see the pattern of the route as we come back now to our rooftop. There, on the left in the distance, the clock of the Law Courts, the Tower of St. Clement Danes, the Royal Air Force's own church now. And thus, in the far distance, back to that great dome of this cathedral. Here, the clock on one of the twin towers of the massive west front of the cathedral. This huge portico of this vast building, the Mother Church of the Commonwealth. Outside it, well wrapped, more of the people. And do you notice, as I think you will later on as well, how many young people there are in this crowd? It was always said that young people didn't really know very much about Winston Churchill. He was, if not a stranger, he was just a figure in the history books or someone that was talked about by their elders. But among the thousands of people who have gone through the lying in state in Westminster Hall, there has been a very large percentage of young people, and including all the ones with the new haircuts and the new clothes and the new styles as well. A tremendous admixture of people as indeed this crowd is here. Now back again to the cathedral, and this time to the more privileged people on this occasion who have been entering to be part of the vast congregation. They call this Wren's masterpiece, and if you like something huge, massive, lofty, in places a little gaudy perhaps for some taste, but if you do, then you'll love this enormous church. There stands the bier, the catafalque on which the coffin will lie. It's black, trimmed with silver in the foreground. It lies on a little turntable so that later it can be turned. The candlesticks that you see on each side of it were made indeed for the state funeral of Wellington in 1852, and they were put away and they haven't been used since, and here they are again just for the second time only. And now we look down a vertiginous view from the Whispering Gallery of St. Paul's, more than 100 feet above the floor, and look at this staggering pattern of the people as they move into the cathedral along the nave between the huge arches, right back towards those great west doors still closed so firmly as we saw them a moment ago from the portico outside. And so back again to the misty, cold world outside, looking across at Tower Bridge and at where the Tower of London lies. This ancient fortress, guardian of the city of London from its very earliest days. The White Tower in the centre, the museums, the armaments, all the old horrors and stories of hundreds of years gone by. And still a sombre grimness about this building, although it's now just such a popular showplace. Here its walls and its battlements are set against the business and the skyscrapers of the city. The old cannon in the foreground by the river, more modern cannon soon to fire alongside them when Winston Churchill's body is taken away up the Thames later this morning. In the background you see the streets that lead to the tower, Byward Street, the buildings of the Port of London Authority, the smaller buildings of Trinity House, because the river and the port authorities have their home in this area of the city round the tower. There in the background, as we look down now, we come towards Tower Hill itself, where by old tradition people may come to say what they like with very little limitation, a freedom of speech of which surely Winston Churchill must rank as one of the greatest champions ever. Here the gates of the tower, one of the entrances, there on duty, one of the yeoman warders examining the tickets of people arriving to some privileged position inside. And near it, quite near it, the smaller entrance that leads down, you see the river behind, to Tower Wharf. And this is the gate through which they will take the coffin presently when services in St. Paul's are over, taking it down out of our sight, briefly behind this wall, down to Tower Pier. They come from the pathway that you saw out here to this strangely rural, this almost rustic little corner of London, with the old house and its beams and the wooden footbridge, which turns in a series of zigzags as it brings you down to the water level, though when the procession gets here later, it'll be virtually high water, still slack water in the river, and these gangways will be more level than they are even now. Along the footbridge, turning left and right again at right angles, until finally you come out over the water and you are on the floating pier of the tower itself. A pier used on other occasions in the summer for such gay and cheerful and happy things, the tripper boats that go off from here down to Margate and over for one-day trips to France, packed with happy people in the summertime. In comparison, very empty. Here, lying alongside, being prepared, the Haven Gore, the survey ship of the Port of London Authority, where, on that small strip of wood you see in the middle of the picture, the coffin will lie on its last journey up the river. Behind it is the launch, the Tame, smaller ship, used for survey in the upper Thames, which will carry the mourners on their way upriver. In the background, the wharves of London, there a long-distance view of Tower Pier itself, on which we were standing a moment ago. And so back to where one of the oil tankers, the petrol ships, is on its way into London. The ceaseless river traffic, which is going to be stopped for just an hour or so later today to enable the procession to move in peace without interruption. But for now, the traffic works as ever on London River. And you do see this lovely city in all its splendor and its grandeur. The cranes clustered like thickly packed stalks in front of Hayes Wharf, the power station chimneys, and the bridges that lead from here to the end of the journey. You can see them even better now from high on the top of Unilever House. Looking down again, this time from a different vantage point, to where the Cannon Street Railway Bridge and Southwark Bridge cross the river, way over there to the far side in the south, looking right deep into Southwark, to Bankside, and so on, wharves all the way, now only for smaller ships, new buildings in the background because they're always putting them up on the edge of the river. There in King's Reach, President, Chrysanthemum, the ships of the London Division of the Royal Naval Reserve, and just on the right in the distance, Scott's little ship Discovery, and Wellington, the floating livery hall of the Master Mariners. And this great sweep of the river that brings you to Waterloo Bridge, which replaced the original some 30 years ago. And then looking across again, now from the south, we look across at virtually the Strand and the beginnings of Whitehall, as we turn gradually back now until we're looking almost towards Charing Cross and Westminster. We look now at this moment, in fact, at the Hungerford Railway Bridge from the Festival Pier on the south side of the river. This is the end of the river journey. The coffin comes here, is taken from here by a motor hearse to Waterloo Station, which lies but 100 yards or so away. This is the interior of the station. We look at platform 11. A sombre, ordinary sight, because the life of Waterloo must go on until the very last moment, and then only platform 11 can be disengaged. Here they are getting ready to put the ramp, indeed they have put the ramp, along which the bearer party with the coffin will walk. From the head of the platform we see where the locomotive will take the train, and that train will leave at about 1:30. And so from this platform we shall watch the funeral train as it leaves on the last part of the journey. From London, 2 hours away, to a little railway station on the line from London to Worcester. A station called Hanborough for Blenheim. It's very small, it's very insignificant, it's very unimportant, but not today perhaps. The little buildings grouped on the right, a very simple setting, not a very smart station, and indeed it's one, I believe, doomed to passenger closure. But it's 2 miles from this church, which is the Church of Blaydon. It is in this churchyard that they're going to lay Winston Churchill to rest. A quiet country setting, not of any outstanding beauty, but of the greatest peace. Here lie the Spencer Churchill coffins, the family coffins, close by the churchyard wall. The shelter of trees, the warmth and the green and the comfort of grass and the birds that sing above. It's a perfect family setting. Let's now leave it and come back to the start of the great events of today, of which that was the end, here again to the yard at Westminster. It is perhaps 2 minutes before they will bring out the coffin, and the great funeral procession will start on its way through London. There have been funeral processions before. There have been state funerals of commoners before, and of those who were not commoners. There has not been, I think, in the whole history of our land, a state funeral or an occasion which has touched the hearts of people quite as much as this one is doing today. Motionless the gun crews, empty the gun carriage, used for the burials of sovereigns. Waiting elsewhere, the gunners to fire their salutes when the procession moves. Here, the men who hold the insignia, officers of the Queen's Royal Irish Hussars, holding on their cushions the orders and the decorations of the dead man. 4 officers, their red caps, their dark greatcoats, and glittering and gleaming. Some of them orders so big like that of Nepal, that they occupy the whole cushion. Norway, the Order of St. Olaf, Nepal, and at the far end in the distance, a mass of smaller medals of Luxembourg and Belgium and Libya, and the little campaign medals that Churchill wore on his breast. The banners of Spencer Churchill and of the Cinque Ports are carried before them. The orders are ringing out. The procession is about to begin. The coffin is about to be brought out into the yard.